They called her worthless, but the king saw a queen wrapped in scars and silence. The kitchen smelled of blood and smoke. Alara scrubbed the stone counter until her knuckles bled, her hands raw from lye soap and cold water. Around her, the pack house thrummed with life, warriors laughing in the great hall, servants rushing between corridors, the constant hum of a world that had no place for her. She was invisible. Worse than invisible. She was the joke. "Look at her," someone whispered behind her. "How does she even fit through the doors?" Laughter, always laughter. Alara kept her head down, her jaw tight, her hands moving mechanically across the stone. She had learned long ago that responding only made it worse. That silence was armor, that if she made herself small enough, despite her body's refusal to cooperate, maybe they'd stop noticing. They never did. "Alara!" The head cook's voice cut through the kitchen like a whip. "The Alpha King's delegation arrives tonight. We need twice the usual portions. Get to work on the roasts." Alara nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. She moved to the hearth where 3 massive boars hung on hooks, their bodies cold and heavy. She'd spent the morning hauling them from the storage cellar alone. No one offered to help. No one ever did. As she worked, cutting and seasoning, her mind drifted to the story she'd heard whispered through the pack house. The Alpha King was coming, Kale of the Northern Territories, the Winter Wolf, the king who had united the fractured packs through strength and mercy in equal measure. Some said he was brutal, others said he was just. All agreed he was powerful. And tomorrow he would sit in their great hall, surrounded by warriors and elders, while Alara served him from the shadows. Just another invisible girl in a world of wolves. Hours later, as the sun dipped below the mountains, the kitchen erupted into chaos. Servants rushed to prepare platters of roasted meat, honeyed vegetables, and bread still warm from the ovens. Alara moved among them like a ghost, her arms aching, her feet swollen, her body screaming for rest. "You're serving the head table tonight," the head cook said, thrusting a heavy platter into Alara's hands. Her stomach dropped. "But I always serve the lower tables." "Not tonight. We're short on staff. Don't embarrass us." Alara's hands trembled around the platter, the head table, where the Alpha sat, where the delegation would gather, where every eye in the hall would see her, where the cruelty would be sharpest. She carried the platter through the corridors, her breath shallow, her heart hammering. The great hall doors loomed ahead, firelight spilling through the gaps, the sound of voices rising like a tide. She pushed through. The hall fell silent. Not completely, not suddenly, but enough that she felt it, the shift in attention, the eyes turning toward her, the whispers beginning. "Is that the fat girl? Why is she at the head table? Someone must be punishing the guests." Laughter rippled through the room. Alara kept walking, her eyes fixed on the floor, the platter heavy in her hands. She reached the head table and began setting down dishes, her movements careful, practiced, invisible, until she looked up and met his eyes. He sat at the center of the table, draped in dark fur and leather, his presence filling the space like winter itself. His face was carved from stone, sharp jaw, scarred brow, eyes the color of storms. He watched her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Not with disgust, not with mockery, with curiosity. Alara looked away quickly, setting down the last plate. She turned to leave. "Wait!" His voice stopped her cold. She turned slowly, her heart hammering. "Yes, my lord?" "What's your name?" The hall went silent. Every wolf, every warrior, every elder turned to stare. Alara's throat tightened. "Alara, my lord." "Alara." He said it slowly, as if tasting the syllables. "Do you always serve this hall?" "No, my lord. Only tonight." "Why only tonight?" She hesitated. "We're short on staff, my lord. That's not what I asked." His gaze didn't waver. "Why you?" Alara's hands trembled. She could feel the eyes on her, could hear the whispers starting again, could sense the trap closing. Because no one else wanted to, my lord. The silence deepened. Then someone laughed, a young warrior at the lower tables. Others joined in. The sound spread through the hall like fire. Alara's face burned. She turned to leave. Silence. The Alpha King's voice cut through the laughter like a blade. The hall went still. He stood slowly, his eyes sweeping across the room. When he spoke, his voice was cold, measured, absolute. The next person who laughs answers to me. No one moved. No one breathed. Kyle's gaze returned to Alara. You cooked this meal? She nodded, unable to speak. Then sit. Her eyes widened. My lord, you heard me. Sit. I can't. You can, and you will. He gestured to the empty chair beside him, the seat reserved for honored guests. Anyone who prepares a feast worthy of kings deserves to share it. Alara's chest tightened. My lord, I'm just a servant. You're a wolf. His voice softened, but the command remained. And in my presence, all wolves are equal. Now sit. She looked around the hall, at the shocked faces, the whispers, the disbelief. Then she sat. The chair felt wrong, too high, too exposed, but Kale filled a plate and set it before her without ceremony. Eat, he said. I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. So she did, and as she ate, the hall slowly resumed its noise. Warriors returned to their conversations, elders to their debates. But Alara felt every glance, every whisper, every ounce of judgment pressing down on her shoulders. Kyle leaned closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear. They laugh because they're afraid. Afraid of what? She whispered back. Of anything that challenges what they believe is weak. His eyes met hers. But strength isn't about size or shape or power. It's about endurance. And I'd wager you've endured more than anyone in this hall. Alara's throat tightened. You don't know me. Not yet. He picked up his cup, studying her over the rim. But I'd like to. Before she could respond, the head cook appeared at the table's edge, his face pale. My lord, I apologize for the confusion. This girl shouldn't be... This girl, Kyle interrupted, his voice cold, is exactly where she belongs. And if you question my judgment again, you'll find yourself looking for new employment. The cook bowed quickly and retreated. Kale returned his attention to Alara. Tell me something. What? Why do you stay here? In a pack that treats you like this? Alara looked down at her plate. I have nowhere else to go. Everyone has somewhere to go. They just need someone to show them the way. She looked at him, searching his face. Are you offering? He held her gaze, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. Perhaps, but first, I need to understand what I'm offering to save. I'm not worth saving. That, he said quietly, is the first lie you've told me tonight. Alara's breath caught, and for the first time in years, she felt something other than shame. She felt seen. Chapter 2. The morning came with whispers. Alara woke in the servants' quarters, a cramped room she shared with 3 others, none of whom spoke to her. They were already gone when she opened her eyes, leaving her alone with the cold and the memory of last night. The Alpha King had made her sit beside him, had defended her, had looked at her like she mattered. It felt like a dream or a trap. She dressed quickly and made her way to the kitchen, expecting the usual routine. But when she arrived, the head cook was waiting, his expression sour. You're wanted in the guest wing. Alara froze. What? The Alpha King requested you specifically. Something about breakfast. He waved her away dismissively. Don't keep him waiting. Her stomach twisted. She walked through the corridors, her heart hammering, her mind racing with possibilities. Was this punishment? A test? Another opportunity for humiliation? She reached the guest wing and knocked softly on the heavy oak door. Enter. She pushed the door open. Kyle stood by the window, his back to her, looking out over the mountains. He wore simple clothing, no armor, no crown, just dark fabric that made him look less like a king and more like a man. "You asked for me, my lord?" He turned. "I did. Close the door." She obeyed, her hands trembling. "I want you to eat breakfast with me," he said. "My lord, I should be serving. I don't want a servant. I want company." He gestured to a small table set with bread, cheese, and fruit. "Sit." Alara hesitated, then crossed the room and sat. Kyle joined her, filling 2 plates with quiet efficiency. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Doing what?" "Treating me like I'm worth something." Kyle set down the bread he'd been cutting and looked at her directly. "Because you are." "You don't know me." "Then tell me." He leaned back, his expression open. "Who are you, Ilara?" She didn't know how to answer. No one had ever asked. "I'm no one," she finally said. "I was born into this pack. My parents died when I was young. I've worked in the kitchens ever since. And your wolf?" She looked away. "I don't have one." "You never shifted?" "Never." Her voice was barely a whisper. "The healers said there's something wrong with me. That I'm broken." "Broken," Kyle repeated, his tone flat. "That's what they told you?" She nodded. "And you believed them?" What else was I supposed to believe? Kyle was silent for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "I've met a lot of broken things in my life, Alara. Broken swords, broken treaties, broken wolves. And you know what I've learned?" She looked at him. "Broken things are still useful, still valuable. They just need someone who knows how to see past the cracks." He paused. "You're not broken. You're just surrounded by people too blind to see what you are." "And what am I?" "I don't know yet." He smiled faintly. "But I intend to find out." Before she could respond, a knock sounded at the door. "Enter," Kyle called. One of his warriors stepped inside, a tall woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. "My lord, the alpha of this pack requests an audience." Kyle's expression hardened. "Tell him I'll meet him in the Great Hall in 1 hour." "Yes, my lord." The warrior's gaze flicked to Alara, curiosity evident, before she left. Kyle stood. "I need to handle pack business, but I want you to stay in this wing today. Don't return to the kitchens." "Why?" "Because I don't trust them not to punish you for last night." His jaw tightened. "And I won't have you hurt because of my choices." "You can't protect me forever." "Maybe not." He moved to the door, then paused. "But I can try." He left. Alara sat alone in the guest chamber, her mind spinning. She didn't understand what was happening. Didn't understand why the Alpha King cared. Didn't understand what he saw in her that no one else did. But for the first time in her life, she wanted to find out. Hours passed. She wandered the guest wing, touching the fine fabrics, the polished wood, the windows that overlooked a world she'd only ever seen from below. Then she heard voices, angry voices. She moved to the door and pressed her ear against it. "Insulted my entire pack!" The Alpha's voice, sharp with rage. "You insulted her first!" Kyle's voice, cold and steady. "She's a servant, a broken wolf. She deserves respect. Same as any wolf in your pack. And if you can't provide that, perhaps you don't deserve to lead them." Silence. Then the Alpha again, his voice lower, dangerous. "You're overstepping, Kyle. This is my territory. And I'm the king. That makes every territory my concern." Kyle's voice didn't rise, but the threat was clear. "Fix this, or I will." Footsteps, a door slamming, then silence. Alara stepped back from the door, her heart pounding. He had defended her again. Against the Alpha himself. She didn't know whether to feel grateful or terrified. That evening, Kyle returned. He looked tired, his shoulders heavy with weight he'd carried too long. Are you all right? Alara asked. He glanced at her, surprised by the question. I should be asking you that. I'm fine, but you look exhausted. Politics. He moved to the window, staring out at the darkening sky. It's exhausting work, trying to change minds that have been closed for decades. Is that what you're doing? Changing minds? Trying. He turned to face her. But it's slow, and sometimes I wonder if it's worth it. It is. He raised an eyebrow. You sound certain. Because I've lived in a world where minds don't change, where cruelty is normal, where people like me are invisible. She stepped closer. If you can change even one mind, you've changed everything. Kyle studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, a real smile, soft and genuine. Maybe you're right. I usually am. He laughed, actually laughed. The sound was warm and unexpected. You're different than I thought, he said. So are you. They stood in comfortable silence, the firelight dancing between them. Then Kyle spoke, his voice quiet. I leave tomorrow, back to my territory. Alara's chest tightened. Oh, but I want you to come with me. She stared at him. What? Come with me. To the northern territories, away from this pack, away from people who can't see what you are. I can't. Why not? Because She faltered. Because I don't belong in your world. You don't belong in this one either. He stepped closer. Come with me, Alara. Let me show you what it means to be seen. Her heart hammered. Why do you care so much? Because, he said quietly, I know what it's like to be invisible, to carry weight no one acknowledges, to be surrounded by people and still feel alone. His eyes held hers. And I think you do too. Alara's breath caught. He was right. He saw her, really saw her. I'll think about it, she whispered. That's all I ask. He left her alone with her thoughts and the impossible choice. Stay in a world that hated her, or follow a king into the unknown. Chapter 3. The decision came at dawn. Alara stood in the courtyard, a small bundle of belongings clutched in her hands, watching as Kale's delegation prepared to leave. Warriors checked their mounts, servants loaded supplies, and through it all, Kyle moved with quiet authority, his presence commanding without effort. She had made her choice. The head cook found her as she waited. His expression was cold. So you're really leaving? Yes. Good riddance. He spat at her feet. You were always more trouble than you were worth. Alara said nothing. She had learned long ago that some people weren't worth the words. Kyle appeared at her side, his presence like a wall between her and the cook. Is there a problem? The cook paled. No, my lord, just saying goodbye. Then say it and leave. The cook fled. Kale looked down at Alara, his expression softening. Ready? She nodded, unable to speak. He led her to a horse, a gentle mare with kind eyes. She's yours for the journey. I don't know how to ride. Then I'll teach you. He helped her mount, his hands steady and sure. Then he swung onto his own horse, a massive black stallion that matched his presence perfectly. The delegation moved out, and Alara left the only home she'd ever known. They traveled through forests thick with pine and snow, the world opening wider with every mile. Alara had never been beyond her pack's territory, had never seen mountains touch the sky or rivers carve through stone. Everything was new, everything was overwhelming. And Kale stayed beside her through it all. He taught her to ride, showed her how to read the forest, told her stories of the northern territories, of ice palaces and wolf songs, of traditions older than memory. What's it like? She asked one evening as they made camp. Being king? Kale was quiet for a moment, tending the fire. Lonely. Lonely? You're surrounded by people. That doesn't mean you're not alone. He looked at her across the flames. A crown is heavy, and most people only see the crown, not the person wearing it. Is that why you noticed me? Because I didn't see a crown? Maybe. He smiled faintly. Or maybe because you reminded me that there's more to strength than power. I'm not strong. You survived years in a pack that treated you like nothing. You endured. You kept going. His voice was quiet but firm. That's the strongest thing I know. Ilara looked away, her throat tight. No one had ever called her strong before. They reached the Northern Territories on the 4th day. The moment they crossed the border, Ilara felt the change. The air was colder, sharper, the trees taller, and everywhere wolves moved through the shadows, not threatening, but watchful. The pack compound rose from the valley like something carved from ice and stone. Towers reached toward the sky, walls thick enough to withstand sieges, and at its center, a great hall that glowed with firelight and life. "Welcome home," Kyle said. They entered the compound, and immediately wolves gathered, warriors, elders, servants, all of them staring at Ilara with varying degrees of curiosity and confusion. An elder stepped forward, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. "My lord, who is this?" "This is Ilara," Kyle said simply. "She's under my protection." "Protection from what?" "From anyone who treats her the way her last pack did." His voice carried weight, authority. "She stays in the guest wing. She's to be treated with respect. Anyone who disobeys answers to me." The elder's eyes widened slightly. Then she bowed. "As you command, my lord." Kyle led Ilara through the compound, up stone stairs worn smooth by time, to a chamber that overlooked the valley. "This is yours," he said. Ilara stepped inside. The room was beautiful, furs on the bed, a hearth crackling with warmth, windows that framed the mountains like paintings. "It's too much," she whispered. "It's exactly what you deserve." He moved to the door. "Rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." "Kyle?" He turned. "Thank you." He held her gaze for a long moment. "Don't thank me yet." Then he was gone. Ilara stood alone in the chamber, surrounded by warmth and beauty, and the impossible reality that her life had changed. That night, as she lay in the soft bed, she heard something outside her window. Singing. She moved to the glass and looked out. Below, in the courtyard, wolves had gathered around a fire. They sang in harmony, a song without words, just pure sound that rose and fell like waves. It was beautiful, and for the first time in her life, Ilara felt like she might belong somewhere. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments of the night they find you. Chapter 4. The whispers started on the 2nd day. Ilara felt them everywhere she went, in the halls, the courtyard, the dining hall. Eyes followed her. Conversation stopped when she passed, and though no one was outwardly cruel, the judgment was clear. Who is she? Why is she here? What does the king see in her? She tried to ignore it, tried to focus on settling into this new life, but the weight of scrutiny was heavy, familiar, suffocating. On the 3rd morning, she found Kale in the Great Hall, reviewing reports with his advisors. He looked up when she entered, his expression softening. "Ilara, come." She approached hesitantly. The advisors watched her with thinly veiled curiosity. "I want you to join me for the council meeting today," Kale said. One of the advisors, an older man with a scarred face, frowned. "My lord, council meetings are for pack leaders and warriors, and anyone I choose to invite." Kale's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Ilara stays." The advisor bowed stiffly. The meeting was long and tedious. Ilara sat in the corner, trying to make herself invisible, listening to debates about territory disputes, resource allocation, and political alliances. But halfway through, something shifted. A younger advisor was presenting a proposal to expand hunting grounds into contested territory. The plan was aggressive, risky, likely to provoke conflict. The benefits outweigh the risks, the advisor argued. We need more resources. At what cost? Kyle asked. Starting a war? A small conflict. Nothing we can't handle. Alara found herself speaking before she realized it. What about the wolves who live there? The room fell silent. Every eye turned to her. The young advisor's expression was incredulous. Excuse me? The contested territory. You said it's occupied by a smaller pack. What happens to them if you expand? They'll move, or integrate, or be forced out, displaced, left with nothing. Alara's voice was steady despite the pounding of her heart. I know what that feels like, to have nowhere to go, no one to turn to. She looked at Kale. Is that the kind of king you want to be? The silence deepened. Then Kale spoke, his voice quiet. No, it's not. He turned to the advisor. Revise the proposal, find a way to expand that doesn't displace anyone, or don't expand at all. My lord, that's final. The advisor bowed, his jaw tight. The meeting continued, but Alara barely heard it. She felt the weight of every stare, every judgment, every unspoken criticism. When the meeting finally ended, Kale approached her. Walk with me. They moved through the compound in silence, eventually reaching a balcony that overlooked the valley. The sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink. I'm sorry, Alara said quietly. I shouldn't have spoken. Why not? Because I'm not a warrior, not an advisor. I'm just someone with a perspective no one else in that room had. He turned to face her. You were right. I was so focused on strategy that I forgot about the people it would affect. You reminded me. He paused. That's valuable. Your advisors don't think so. My advisors need to learn that wisdom comes from unexpected places. He smiled faintly. Besides, I didn't bring you here to be silent. I brought you here to be seen. Ilara's throat tightened. I don't know how to do that. You're already doing it. His hand found hers, warm and steady. Just by being here, just by speaking, just by existing despite everyone who told you not to. She looked at their joined hands, her heart racing. Why do you believe in me so much? Because someone needs to. His voice was quiet, raw. And because I see in you what I wish someone had seen in me years ago. What's that? Worth, beyond the role, beyond the expectations, beyond what everyone else says you should be. His eyes met hers. You're worth believing in, Alara, even if you don't believe it yet. She wanted to say something, wanted to thank him, explain how much his words meant. But before she could, a commotion erupted in the courtyard below. Shouting, the clash of steel. Kale's expression hardened. Stay here. He ran toward the noise, and despite his order, Alara followed. In the courtyard, two wolves circled each other, one of Kale's warriors and an outsider wearing ragged leather. Blood stained the snow. What's going on? Kale's voice cut through the chaos. The warrior spoke first. This rogue tried to breach the walls, my lord. I'm not a rogue, the outsider shouted. His voice was desperate, exhausted. I'm a messenger from the eastern packs. We need help. Kyle approached slowly, his hand on his blade. What kind of help? Sickness. It's spreading through our territory, killing our elders, our children. The messenger fell to his knees. We've tried everything. Nothing works. We heard stories of a healer in the north, someone marked by the goddess. Kale's expression didn't change. There's no healer here. Please. The messenger's voice broke. We're dying. Alara stepped forward, her heart pounding. I'll go. Kyle turned to her, his eyes sharp. No. If they need help, you're not a healer. But I could try. She looked at the messenger, at the desperation in his eyes. I have to try. Elara, you said I was worth something. Prove it. Let me help. Kyle stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned to the messenger. How far? 3 days' journey, maybe 4. Kale's jaw tightened. We leave at dawn. We? Elara asked. You think I'm letting you go alone? His voice was firm. Where you go, I go. That night, as Elara prepared for the journey, she felt something shift inside her. For the first time in her life, she had purpose, and someone who believed she could fulfill it. Chapter 5. They left before sunrise. Kale assembled a small group, 3 warriors, the messenger, and Elara. They traveled light and fast, pushing through forests and over frozen rivers, the urgency heavy in every step. The messenger, whose name was Gareth, spoke little, but when he did, his words painted a grim picture. It started with the children. Fever, weakness. Then the elders began falling ill. Our healers tried every remedy. Nothing worked. His voice was hollow. By the time I left, we'd lost 20. Maybe more by now. Elara listened, her chest tight with dread. She had no training, no knowledge of healing, but something inside her whispered that she needed to try. On the second night, as they made camp, Kyle found her sitting alone by the fire. You're quiet, he said. I'm scared. Of what? Of failing, of not being able to help, of proving everyone right. That I'm worthless. She looked at him. What if I can't do this? Kyle sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Then you'll have tried, and that's more than most people ever do. That's not enough. It has to be. His voice was quiet but firm, because we can't control the outcome, only the effort. Is that what you tell yourself, when you're carrying the weight of an entire kingdom? He smiled faintly. Every single day. They sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling between them and the stars. Kyle? Yes. Thank you for coming with me. I told you, where you go, I go. Why? He didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet she almost missed it. Because you make me remember what it means to care about something other than duty. Elara's breath caught. Before she could respond, one of the warriors approached. My lord, we should rest. Long day tomorrow. Kyle nodded and stood, but his hand lingered on Elara's shoulder for just a moment. A promise, a comfort, a connection. They reached the Eastern Territory on the 4th day. The pack compound was smaller than Kyle's, more village than fortress. But even from a distance, Elara could see the devastation. Bodies wrapped in cloth lay outside the healer's lodge. Wolves moved slowly, exhausted, grief-stricken. The air smelled of smoke and sickness. Gareth led them to the Alpha, a weathered man with hollow eyes. You brought help, the Alpha said, his voice rough with exhaustion. This is Elara, Kyle said. She may be able to help. The Alpha looked at her, hope and skepticism warring in his expression. The goddess marked you? I don't know, Elara said honestly, but I'll try. He led her to the healer's lodge. Inside, the sick lay on makeshift beds, children burning with fever, elders too weak to move, warriors who had survived countless battles only to fall to invisible enemy. Elara's hands trembled. She had no idea what to do. Then she remembered Kale's words. Trust yourself. She approached the nearest patient, a young girl no more than 7. Her skin was pale, her breathing shallow. Elara knelt beside her and placed her hands on the girl's forehead. Nothing happened. She closed her eyes, trying to feel something, anything. But there was only fear and doubt. Then faintly, she felt it. A warmth, deep in her chest, spreading through her arms, into her hands. The girl's breathing steadied. Color returned to her cheeks. Elara gasped and pulled her hands back. The girl opened her eyes. I feel better. The room went silent. Ilara stared at her hands, trembling. She didn't understand what had just happened, but she didn't have time to question it. She moved to the next patient, and the next, and the next. Hours passed. Her body ached. Her mind screamed for rest, but she kept going. By nightfall, every patient in the lodge was stable, fever broken, strength returning. The Alpha found her sitting outside, her hands still glowing faintly with silver light. You saved them, he said, his voice thick with emotion. All of them. Ilara looked up at him, exhausted. I don't know how. The goddess knows. He knelt before her. You have our eternal gratitude. Anything you need. Anything you want. It's yours. I just want to rest. He smiled. Then rest you shall. Kyle found her later, in the small room they'd been given. She was sitting on the bed, staring at her hands. You did it, he said softly. I still don't understand how. Does it matter? He sat beside her. You saved lives, Ilara. That's what matters. She looked at him, tears burning in her eyes. I've never been useful before, never mattered. You've always mattered. His hand found hers. Everyone else was just too blind to see it. Ilara leaned against him, exhaustion and relief crashing over her in waves. And for the first time in her life, she felt like she had found her place, not as a servant, not as a joke, but as someone who mattered. Chapter 6. They stayed in the Eastern Territory for 3 more days. Ilara continued to heal, not just the sick, but old wounds, chronic pains, injuries that had never properly mended. Word spread quickly. Wolves from neighboring packs began arriving, desperate for her touch. She healed them all. But with each healing, the exhaustion deepened. The silver light in her chest grew dimmer, and though she said nothing, Kale noticed. On the 3rd evening, he found her alone in the healer's lodge, her hands trembling as she tried to heal a warrior's broken leg. Enough, he said. I can do one more. No. He gently pulled her hands away. You're done for today. But he needs, and you need rest, or you'll collapse. His voice was firm but gentle. Come. He led her outside, away from the compound, into the forest. They walked in silence until they reached a clearing where moonlight pooled like silver water. Sit, he said. She sat, and he joined her. You're pushing too hard, he said quietly. People need help. And you need to survive. He turned to face her. You can't heal everyone, Ilara, and you can't destroy yourself trying. Why not? For the first time in my life, I'm useful. I matter. You've always mattered. His voice was sharp with frustration. Why can't you see that? Because no one ever showed me, her voice broke. My entire life, I've been nothing, worthless, a joke, and now, finally, I have value, purpose, and you're telling me to stop? I'm telling you to survive. He stood, pacing. Because if you burn yourself out trying to save everyone else, you'll die. And then what? Who saves the next person? Who carries this gift? Ilara looked away, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how to balance it. Then learn. He knelt in front of her, his hands on her shoulders. But learn while living, not dying. She met his eyes, seeing the fear beneath the frustration. You care. Of course I care. His voice was raw. I brought you here to help people, to give you a chance. And watching you destroy yourself for strangers who'll forget you the moment you leave. He stopped, his jaw tight. I can't watch that. Then what do you want from me? I want you to understand that your worth isn't measured by what you can do for others. It's inherent. It exists whether you heal a single soul or save 1,000. His hands moved to frame her face. You matter, Ilara, not because of your gift, but because you're you. The words hung between them, heavy with truth. Alara's tears fell harder. I don't know how to believe that. Then let me believe it for you, until you can. He pulled her into his arms, and she collapsed against him, exhaustion and emotion finally breaking through the walls she'd built. They sat like that for a long time, her trembling, him holding her steady, the moonlight wrapping around them like a blessing. Finally she spoke. I'm scared. Of what? Of losing this, of going back to being nothing. You'll never be nothing, not to me. His voice was fierce. And anyone who makes you feel that way has to go through me first. She pulled back to look at him, seeing the truth in his eyes. You really mean that? Every word. Something shifted in her chest. Not just gratitude, not just relief. Something deeper, something that felt like hope. The next morning, they prepared to leave. The Eastern Alpha tried to convince them to stay longer, offering alliances, resources, anything to keep the healer among them. But Kale refused. She needs to rest, and my territory needs their king. As they rode out, Ilara looked back at the compound. The wolves gathered at the gates, watching her leave. Some bowed, others raised their hands in farewell. She had saved them, and in doing so, she had begun to save herself. The journey back was slower. Kale insisted on frequent stops, making sure Ilara rested. The warriors teased him gently about being overprotective, but he ignored them. On the final night before reaching home, Ilara found him sitting alone by the fire, sharpening his blade. Can't sleep? She asked. Too much on my mind. She sat beside him. Want to talk about it? He was silent for a moment. Then he set the blade aside. When we get back, the council will hear about what you did, about your gift. Is that bad? It's complicated. He looked at her. They'll want to use you, to claim you as a resource for all the packs, and I'll have to fight to keep you safe. Maybe they're right. Maybe I should help everyone. Not at the cost of your life. His voice was firm. You're not a tool, Ilara. You're a person. And you deserve to choose how you use your gift. What if I choose to help? Then I'll support you, but on your terms, not theirs. She studied his face in the firelight. You'd really go to war with the council for me? Without hesitation. Why? He held her gaze, and in his eyes, she saw something she'd never expected to find. Not just protection, not just respect. Something that looked like love. Because, he said quietly, you're mine to protect, and I don't give up what's mine. Ilara's breath caught. Yours? If you'll have me. The world narrowed to the space between them, to the firelight dancing across his face, to the steady warmth of his presence. I've been yours since you made me sit at that table, she whispered. He smiled, a real smile, soft and unguarded. And then he kissed her. It was gentle, careful, a question and an answer all at once. When they pulled apart, Ilara was trembling. What happens now? She asked. Now, he said, his forehead resting against hers, we go home, and we face whatever comes, together. Together, always. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw your worth. Chapter 7. They returned to the Northern Territory at midday. The pack gathered in the courtyard, their expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. News had traveled fast. The healer who saved the eastern packs. The girl the king protected. Kale dismounted and helped Ilara down, his hand lingering on hers longer than necessary. The gesture didn't go unnoticed. Whispers rippled through the crowd. The elder Thalia approached. My lord, the council has requested an audience. They heard about the Eastern Territory. Kale's jaw tightened. When? They'll arrive tomorrow. Of course they will. He turned to Ilara. Go to your chamber. Rest. Kyle, please. His voice was gentle but firm. Let me handle this. She wanted to argue, wanted to stand beside him. But the exhaustion in his eyes stopped her. She nodded and retreated to her chamber. That night, she couldn't sleep. She paced the room, her mind racing with possibilities. What would the council demand? Would they try to take her? Would Kale be able to stop them? Near midnight, a knock sounded at her door. "Come in," she called. Kale entered, looking exhausted. "I'm sorry. Did I wake you?" "I wasn't sleeping." He sat on the edge of her bed, his shoulders heavy. "The council will be here by noon. They'll want to see your gift. Test it. What do I do? You show them what you can do, on your terms." He looked at her. "But if at any point you feel uncomfortable, you tell me, and I'll end it. You can't fight the entire council. Watch me." Despite everything, she smiled. "You're stubborn. So are you." He reached for her hand. "That's why this works." She squeezed his hand. "I'm scared." "I know. So am I." "You? The Alpha King?" "Being a king doesn't mean I'm not terrified of losing what matters." His eyes held hers. "And you matter, Ilara, more than I expected, more than I'm ready to admit." Her breath caught. "Kyle?" "I know the timing is terrible. I know we're about to face the council. I know this is complicated." He stood, still holding her hand. "But I need you to know. Before tomorrow. Before whatever happens." He paused. "You're not just under my protection anymore. You're in my heart, and that's not changing, no matter what the council says." Tears burned in her eyes. "I don't deserve—" "Stop." His voice was gentle but firm. "You deserve everything, and I'm going to spend every day proving it to you." He kissed her forehead and left. Ilara stood alone, her heart full and breaking at the same time, because for the first time in her life she had something worth fighting for, and she was terrified of losing it. The council arrived at noon, just as promised. 7 alphas rode through the gates, powerful, commanding, each representing a different territory. At their center was Liana, the golden-haired leader Ilara remembered from the stories Kale had told. The pack gathered in the great hall. Ilara stood beside Kale at the head table, her hands trembling. Liana's eyes locked on her immediately. "So this is the healer." "Her name is Ilara," Kale said coldly. "My apologies, Ilara." Liana's smile was calculating. "We've heard impressive things about your gift. I did what I could to help. You saved an entire pack from a plague that had stumped their best healers." Liana stepped closer. "That's more than impressive. That's valuable." "She's not for sale," Kale said. "I'm not suggesting purchase. I'm suggesting service." Liana's gaze swept across the room. Imagine what she could do if she traveled to every territory, healed every pack, united the wolves under the goddess's blessing. "Imagine what would happen if she burned herself out doing it," Kyle countered. "She's not a resource to be exploited. She's a gift from the goddess, and gifts are meant to be shared, not against her will." Liana's eyes narrowed. "And what does she will?" All eyes turned to Ilara. Her heart hammered, her throat tightened, but she forced herself to speak. "I want to help people, but on my own terms, not as a tool, not as something to be passed between territories." She looked at Liana directly. "I'll heal who I can, when I can, but I won't be owned." The room fell silent. Liana studied her for a long moment. Brave words for someone with no pack, no power, no protection beyond a king who can't fight us all. "She has power," Kyle said, his voice deadly quiet. "She has me. And if you think I won't defend her against all of you, you're mistaken. You'd start a war? I'd end one." He stepped forward. "Ilara stays here, under my protection. And anyone who tries to take her will answer to the Northern Territories." The tension crackled like lightning. Then another alpha spoke, the scarred man from before. Perhaps a compromise. Liana turned. "What kind?" "She stays here. But if a pack faces a crisis, Plague, disaster, something they can't handle. They can request her aid. And she decides whether to answer. He looked at Alara. Choice, not obligation. Alara glanced at Kyle. He nodded slightly. I can agree to that, she said. Liana's expression was unreadable. Finally, she nodded. Very well. But know this, Kyle. We'll be watching. And if she becomes a threat, she won't. Time will tell. Liana turned to leave, her entourage following. At the door, she paused. You're risking everything for her. I hope she's worth it. She is. When they were gone, the hall erupted in whispers. Kyle turned to Alara. Are you all right? She nodded, unable to speak. He took her hand. Come. He led her out of the hall, through the compound, to the balcony overlooking the valley. You stood up to them, he said. I was terrified, but you did it anyway. That's courage. She looked out at the mountains. What happens now? Now we live. We heal who needs healing. We protect what matters. He pulled her close. And we prove that love is stronger than politics. Love? She looked up at him. Love, he said firmly, because that's what this is, and I'm done pretending otherwise. Alara's tears fell freely now. I love you too. He kissed her, deep, certain, unbreakable. And in that moment, surrounded by mountains and moonlight, Alara finally understood. She wasn't worthless. She wasn't broken. She was loved, and that made her whole. Chapter 8. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Alara had ever known. She settled into life in the Northern Territory, not as a servant, not as a guest, but as someone who belonged. The pack slowly accepted her, drawn by her kindness and awed by her gift. She healed injuries, eased chronic pains, and even helped with difficult births. But more than that, she found family. Thalia became her mentor, teaching her about pack traditions and the old ways. The warriors who had once watched her with suspicion now greeted her with respect. Even the children followed her through the courtyard, asking questions and begging for stories. And Kyle was constant. He made time for her despite his duties. They shared meals in his chambers, walked through the forest at twilight, and talked about everything. Their pasts, their fears, their hopes for the future. One evening, as they sat by the fire in his chambers, Kyle asked the question she'd been dreading. Do you ever miss your old pack? Alara was quiet for a moment. I miss the familiarity, the routine, but I don't miss the pain. Do you think you'll ever forgive them? I don't know. Maybe someday. She looked at him. But I don't need to forgive them to move forward. I just need to accept that they were wrong, and I deserve better. You do. His hand found hers. And I'll spend every day proving it. She smiled. You already have. But peace never lasts forever. On a cold morning in early winter, a messenger arrived at the gates, ragged, bloodied, barely conscious. Kyle was in the courtyard when the guards brought him in. What happened? The messenger gasped for breath. The Western Territory, attacked by rogues, hundreds of them. Led by, he coughed, blood staining his lips, led by a wolf with white hair and red eyes. Kyle's expression went cold. Celine. Alara felt her blood turn to ice. The messenger continued. She's demanding a trade, the healer for the Western Pack's survival. Absolutely not, Kale said immediately. My lord, she's burning villages, killing innocents. She said if the healer doesn't come within 3 days, she'll slaughter everyone. Alara stepped forward. Then I'll go. No. Kyle's voice was absolute. Kyle, people are dying, and you'll die if you go. He turned to face her, his expression fierce. Celine doesn't want to heal anyone. She wants to use you, control you, and I won't let that happen. So we let innocent people die. We find another way. There is no other way, her voice rose. You can't protect me from everything, and I can't live with myself if people die because of me. You're not responsible for her choices, but I can stop them." She moved closer, her voice quieter now. "I have to try, Kyle. It's who I am." He stared at her, conflict warring across his face. "If something happens to you, then you'll avenge me." She tried to smile. "But I won't go alone. Come with me. Bring your warriors. We'll face her together." Kyle was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to his second-in-command. "Gather the war council. We march at dawn." That night, Ilara couldn't sleep. She paced her chamber, her mind racing with fear and determination. A knock sounded at her door. Kyle entered without waiting for permission. He looked exhausted, his shoulders heavy with the weight of command. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "No." He closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms. "I'm terrified." "Of what?" "Of losing you, of making the wrong choice, of failing the people who need me." His voice was raw. "Of everything." She held him tighter. "We'll face it together. That's what you said. I know. But it doesn't make the fear go away." "Good. Fear keeps us careful." She pulled back to look at him. "But it doesn't stop us from doing what's right." He cupped her face in his hands. "When did you become so brave?" "When I met a king who showed me I could be." He kissed her, desperate, tender, filled with everything he couldn't say. When they pulled apart, his forehead rested against hers. "If anything happens tomorrow, nothing will happen. But if it does, I need you to know." He paused. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, and I don't regret a single moment." Tears burned in her eyes. "Neither do I." They held each other through the night, drawing strength from the warmth between them, because tomorrow they would face the storm, and neither knew if they'd survive it. Chapter 9. Dawn came gray and cold. The northern warriors assembled in the courtyard, 200 strong, armed and ready. Kyle stood at their center, his presence commanding even in silence. Ilara wore simple clothing, no armor, no weapons, just the determination of someone who had chosen to fight with healing instead of steel. Thalia approached and pressed something into her hand, a pendant, silver, carved with the same symbols from the cave where Kyle had found her. "For protection," Thalia said, "and to remind you who you are." Ilara closed her fingers around it. "Thank you." They rode west. The journey was hard and fast, pushing through snow and wind. They reached the Western Territory by nightfall of the second day. The devastation was immediate. Burned villages, bodies in the snow, the acrid smell of smoke and death hanging heavy in the air. And at the center of it all, Selene waited. She stood in the ruins of the Western Pack's great hall, surrounded by rogues, her white hair gleaming in the firelight. When she saw Kale's forces approach, she smiled. "Brother, you came." "Let them go, Selene." Kale's voice was cold. "This is between us." "Is it?" Selene's gaze shifted to Ilara. "I think it's between me and her. She's done nothing to you. She exists. That's enough." Selene stepped forward. The goddess marked her, gave her a gift that should have died with the Pathfinders, and I want to know why. "Then ask the goddess." "I'd rather ask her." Selene pointed at Ilara. "Come here, little healer. Let's talk." Kyle moved to block her. "She's not going anywhere." "Then more innocents die." Selene gestured, and rogues dragged forward 3 wolves, bound, beaten, terrified. "Starting with these." Ilara's heart slammed against her ribs. She looked at Kale, seeing the conflict in his eyes. Then she made her choice. She stepped forward. "Ilara, no. It's all right." She touched his arm. "Trust me." She walked toward Selene, her hands trembling but her steps steady. Selene watched her approach, curiosity and cruelty dancing in her red eyes. Brave or stupid. I can't decide which. Maybe both. Alara stopped a few feet away. What do you want? I want to understand how a broken wolf with no pack and no power suddenly becomes the most valuable thing in all the territories. Celine circled her slowly. What makes you special? Nothing. I'm just trying to help people. Liar. Celine's voice was sharp. No one does anything without wanting something in return. So what do you want? Power? Status? My brother's crown. I want people to stop suffering. Celine laughed, cold, mocking. How noble and how boring. She stopped in front of Alara. Show me this gift that's worth burning territories for. I won't heal you. I don't want healing. Celine grabbed one of the captives, a young girl barely conscious. Heal her. Prove you're what they say you are. Alara knelt beside the girl, her hands glowing silver. She placed them on the girl's wounds, and within moments, they began to close. The girl gasped, color returning to her face. Celine stared, her expression unreadable. Interesting. She pulled a blade, and before anyone could react, she drove it into the girl's chest. No! Alara screamed. The girl collapsed, blood spilling across the snow. Heal that, Celine said coldly. Ilara's hands shook as she pressed them to the wound, but nothing happened. The light flickered and died. She's gone, Celine said. You can't bring back the dead, so tell me, what good is your gift if it can't stop me from doing this? She raised her blade toward the next captive. Stop! Kale's voice rang out. You want to fight? Fight me. Leave them out of it. Celine smiled. Finally, the brother I remember. She released the captive and turned to face Kyle. Very well, you and me. No interference. Winner takes everything. Define everything. If I win, the healer comes with me. If you win, I leave the territories and never return. Kyle's jaw tightened. Agreed. No. Alara tried to stop him, but warriors held her back. Kyle, don't. Trust me, he said, echoing her words. Then he drew his blade. They circled each other, siblings who had once been allies, now divided by choices and consequences. Celine struck first. The battle was brutal, steel against steel, speed against strength. They moved like dancers who had practiced this routine 1,000 times, but Celine was faster. She landed a cut across Kale's shoulder, then his thigh. Blood stained the snow. Alara watched, her heart breaking, her gift useless. Then she remembered Thalia's words. The Pathfinders didn't just heal bodies. They healed bonds, mended what was broken. She closed her eyes and reached deep, not for the light in her chest, but for something deeper, something older, and she felt it, the bond between Kale and Selena, broken, twisted, but still there. She poured her gift into it. Silver light erupted from her body, racing across the snow, wrapping around both combatants. They froze. Celine gasped, her blade falling from her hand. Memories flooded through her. Childhood laughter, shared secrets, the moment everything broke. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "Showing you what you've lost," Alara said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "You're angry, hurt, broken, but you're not beyond saving." Celine fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "You don't understand." "I understand pain. I understand rejection. I understand what it's like to be invisible." Ilara approached slowly. "But I also understand that healing starts with a choice, to let go, to forgive, to try again." Celine looked up at her, red eyes filled with decades of anguish. "I can't. You can, if you choose to." The light intensified, and then, slowly, Celine's eyes shifted from red to amber. The rogues fled, sensing their leader's change. Celine collapsed fully, sobbing. Kyle approached cautiously, his blade still raised, but Alara stopped him. "It's over." "How do you know?" Because I healed what was broken. She looked at Celine. She just needs time to remember who she was before the pain. Kyle stared at his sister, conflict and hope warring across his face. Finally, he sheathed his blade. "Take her to the healers," he commanded his warriors. "Keep her under guard, but treat her with respect." They obeyed. Alara swayed, exhaustion finally overwhelming her. Kale caught her before she fell. "You did it," he whispered. "We did it." He carried her through the ruins, through the snow, back to where their warriors waited. And as the sun rose over the mountains, painting the world in gold, the Western pack emerged from hiding. They saw the healer who had saved them, the king who had fought for them, and the broken wolf who had finally found mercy. One by one, they bowed, not out of obligation, but out of love. Epilogue. 3 months later, spring bloomed across the territories. The Western pack rebuilt, stronger and united. Celine remained under Kale's protection, slowly healing from decades of rage and grief. And Alara continued her work, healing, helping, proving every day that mercy was more powerful than cruelty. But the biggest change came one morning when Kale called the entire pack to the courtyard. Alara stood beside him, confused. "What's happening?" "You'll see." The pack gathered, hundreds of wolves from every territory, drawn by rumors and hope. Kyle raised his hand, and silence fell. 3 months ago, he began, his voice carrying across the courtyard, "I found a girl hiding in a cave. She had no pack, no wolf, no reason to trust me. But she took my hand anyway." He turned to Alara, and in doing so, she changed everything. He knelt before her. The crowd gasped. "Alara," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "you are the strongest, bravest, most compassionate soul I've ever known. You've healed broken bodies, mended shattered bonds, and taught an entire kingdom what it means to choose mercy over vengeance." He pulled a ring from his pocket, simple silver, carved with the symbols of the Pathfinders. "Will you stand beside me? Not as someone under my protection, but as my equal, my partner, my queen." Alara's tears fell freely. "Yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms. The courtyard erupted in howls, not of war, but of celebration. And as Kale kissed her before them all, before the pack that had once laughed, the territories that had once doubted, the world that had once dismissed her, Alara finally understood. She had never been worthless. She had just been waiting for someone to see her worth, and now, crowned not by gold but by love, she was home. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.